You're tuned into the Zealous Podcast. I'm your host, Rocky Snyder. This week, I stay at the NSCA headquarters and speak to Blake Brightwell. He's a performance specialist, but also within the NSCA, he is the personal trainer's program manager. We're going to get a better understanding of the NSCA-CPT, and a whole bunch more. But before we get underway, check out my website, rockysnyder.com. We've got some new workshops coming up this year in person as well as online. CEUs for athletic trainers, chiropractors, personal trainers, physical therapists, and strength coaches. And if you want to get yourself a Master's of Science in a related field, check out Satanta College. They've got degrees in applied sports biomechanics and movement science, applied sport and exercise psychology. They've got one on performance coaching, or you can get a Master's of Science in sports injuries and return to performance management. Just enter code RS10 for 10% off tuition today. SatantaCollege.com. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast if you haven't already, and follow us on Instagram at Rocky_Snyder. Enjoy the show. Blake, man, I'm so glad you joined me. I really appreciate it. I know you just got done with weeks and weeks of snowboarding and mainly the Colorado snow, while I have been overhead with waves here on the Central Coast. It's nice that we share board sports, and I can't wait for you to get out here so we can actually share some waves. Maybe by the end of this month or next month, I'm going to hold you to it. But first of all, welcome to the Zealous Podcast.
Thanks for having me, man. Yeah, surfing is my first love, so can't wait to get out there and have some of those California waves too.
Well, if they hold up like the way they have been for almost the last month, you're going to be in for quite a treat. I don't think they'll be up to 100 feet necessarily, but I tell you, a couple weeks ago, I was really hard pressed to try and paddle out, but the current was too strong. The waves were too plentiful, and in the afternoon, we're seeing basically maverick-size waves in Santa Cruz. Guys were towing in on the east side of town on these 30-foot faces off a jet ski. Not really allowed, but if I was out there, it'd be worth the ticket for sure. But yeah, we'll talk surfing when we're in person here. I want to talk
Sounds good.
about strength conditioning and personal training, and give us an understanding of, well, Blake Brightwell, how did you get to be with the NSCA, and yeah, your superhero origin story, shall we say?
That may be talking me up a little too much, but it has been a fun ride, and I'm very, very grateful for where I'm at right now. Um, most people who start with their origin stories say that they have one that's really unique. I feel the same way, but the more stories I hear, I'm not sure that it's so unique. So, the beginning of the washed up strength coach story is, you start out in sports, love what you're doing, end up with an injury, something along those lines. I have one of those, blew out my knee in high school, and thought I wanted to be a physical therapist. So, went to school for my first 4 years of undergrad, thinking that I was going to do physical therapy, was in a strength and conditioning program, and just took the extra prerequisites to go to PT school. Made it to my 400-hour internship at the end of my undergrad, which was inpatient post-acute rehab, and said, oh my goodness, this is not for me. This is not the speed that I want to be going at. Really enjoyed working with injuries, but wanted to see kind of the fruits of the labor and getting people back to what they love doing, right? So not a knock on physical therapists, just wasn't really my calling. So decided to do my master's at A&M Corpus Christi in strength and conditioning. So I have a couple of classes to finish from 10 years ago, but we'll get there at some point. And yeah, I've kind of bounced around from the private sector to collegiate to professional. I've kind of been all over the place. And I really think that's kind of what set the stage for my job now at the NSCA. So started in the big box gym world, moved over into collegiate strength and conditioning, got a job to do NFL combine training and NFL, MLB, NBA off season. So did that for a while, all while working with general population. So pretty
It's pretty
interesting.
diverse, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of all over the place. In the private sector, people tell you to pick a specialization. Mine just kind of came to me, and they're about as polar opposite as could be. It was orthopedic, middle-aged men, usually 50 years or older, and elite athletes. So those are really the two that I've kind of had the most experience with. And I think the benefit of starting the physical therapy route kind of helped me blend return to play with performance, which is kind of a sweet spot that's really picking up steam right now.
So with the physical therapy schooling education that you had in the clinical hours, I'm imagining it was mainly geriatric.
Yes. Yeah, I would
Yeah.
say probably 85% of that is geriatrics. And then, the after school crowd, you'd get the odd high schooler that came in with an ACL for whatever reason. But majority of that was geriatrics.
Yeah, maybe your path would have been different had it been more the athletic or younger crowd, or even high school athletes or something like that, I imagine.
Very likely. Yeah, I was in Corpus Christi, Texas, which, there's not a ton of sport performance opportunity down there. So I didn't really know what all was out there. That was really the route that I probably would have enjoyed, was sports injuries and that sort of thing. But happy with where I ended up.
And then with personal training, you said the 50-plus-year-old males that are trying to get in shape or overcoming some issues, and then athletes. Was that just a kind of a natural flow? It just kind of those populations were attracted to you and maybe vice versa?
Probably so. I really blazed the trail as far as athletic performance goes. I knew for certain that I wanted to be working with athletes in some capacity. And it's such an easy talking point when you're in a gym and someone has a brace on or they're hobbling around. And I'm a pretty empathetic person too. So being able to connect that, I've been through what you're going through and I can help you out. That's just a really fulfilling aspect of the job for me.
Right on. So from Corpus Christi to Colorado, or
I had a
how did you
brief
get where you
stop. I
are?
had to I had to pick up my wife first. So I met Kelly at a regional NSCA conference that was being hosted at my school. So I was actually volunteering for the event. She was a speaker and she
Oh, we
worked.
should pause right there and say this is a great example of why you should volunteer for these regional conferences and actually attend them at the same time. Who knows, your life partner could be just waiting on the wing.
Yeah, it sounds comical, but if you think about it, I mean, you're going to
Yeah.
be you're going to be placed around people that have very similar interests and drives and that sort of thing. So it just kind of worked out. But yeah, I was actually her intern before we got married. So she worked at Michael Johnson Performance,
Oh, sure.
and I knew that that was kind of the next step that I wanted to take, was to work with elite athletes. So I walked up to her after her presentation, which was phenomenal, one of the best ones that I've ever seen at a local event, and said, "Hey, what do I have to do to work at Michael Johnson Performance?" She said, "Our NFL Combine class starts in 3 weeks, so if you can be up there in 3 weeks, then you're good to go." Walked into my job where I was a director at a Y. The very next day, said I quit, and moved up to Dallas, slept on my buddy's couch for 3 months while I did an unpaid internship. And the rest is history.
Holy cow. Now, Lance Walker was working there at the time.
He was the
Got to
man.
hang out with him. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Good guy.
he was doing his international assignments, so I didn't see him a ton. BMAC, Brian McCall was my
Yeah.
direct report. So he was the one who was
Nice.
in charge of the high performance stuff.
Well, it's pretty cool to be surrounded by such professionals and experts in the field. That's quite nice. And so, what was the internship like? I mean, would you recommend it to others?
Yes, just know what you're getting in for. You have to really love what you're doing, and you can get what you want out of it. So we had 18 interns in our class, A lot of them were there just for educational credit. Myself, I was a little bit further along in my career. I had just quit a salaried position where I was growing quickly, so it was kind of a gamble for me. So I knew that I had to get a job out of this. So I busted ass while I was there. I was working 70 hours a week easily every week. It was 6 days a week, and I loved every minute of it. But if you're not ready for that, don't go do it.
And so, financially, did you have a little nest egg set aside? Is that how you could afford 3 months of unpaid internship?
So I was very fortunate. I did have enough for expenses. But my buddy let me crash on his couch for free. I'll have to see if I can find a picture, but we set up a shower curtain next to the couch and I just had an air mattress on the other side of that. So my room was as big as a queen size bed for 3 months. So I was very fortunate that he let me hang out with him, or else I probably wouldn't have been able to do it.
Wow. All right. So you get to the end of the 3 month internship. Then what happens?
So I begged for a job, got the offer, and then the company lost a pretty big deal. So they actually did massive layoffs. After that happened, went and got a job at an Equinox down the road until they were a little bit more financially stable, and then I got brought back in. Um, I guess it was about 6 or 7 months later, so it was a little bit of a waiting game.
Not bad. And you stayed with Michael Johnson Performance for how long?
I stayed there for another year, and then COVID hit. So when COVID hit, they shut down. The Equinox shut down as well, and both I and Kelly knew that we didn't want to end up um, in a big city, right? So we both love the outdoors. We love being physically active. I think that's what drew us to this field in the first place. But it's the implementation of that outdoors in nature that we both really love. So it was either we can hang around and see what's going to happen during COVID, or we can rebuild somewhere else. So that's when we made the move to Colorado. She got a performance job at a place called the Hibble Center up here, which is kind of your integrated medical model where you have orthos, PTs, ATs, strength coaches. And she did that for a couple of years. And I got lucky with my job up here. Kind of forgot the NSCA was in Colorado Springs. Was like, oh, it'd be cool to visit HQ here and there. But I picked up a gym manager job at Avasa and did that for 18 months and got the call for the NSCA job. Didn't even know it was posted, but had someone say, "We think you'd be a good fit for this job. You should apply." And that's kind of how it happened.
Oh, wow. I had no idea. So they kind of recruited you. And when did you pick? So you are your title has changed more or less, but your personal training program manager is that what you started with, or is that your current title?
That's what I started with, and it's still kind of evolving. Or I'm sorry, that's not what I started with. That's what I am currently. The job that I took was business development coordinator. So when I got the call, I said, "Yeah, I'll take the job." Oh, by the way, what does that mean? Like, what am I going to be doing? You know, because I don't have a business background at all. I mean, you learn business acumen through personal training and running your own business that way. But I had never been in the corporate world for the previous 10 years, so I was really running administrative support for the business development team, but it was always in the plan for me to move into the role that I'm in now. That's why I was brought in because there were some changes happening to the structure of our team. So we kind of built it into that. We have a coaching section, tactical section, and then private sector, which is going to be personal training, and then some of the sport performance stuff that I talked about that I did earlier on in my career. So basically anyone that doesn't fall in the buckets of collegiate or professional sport performance or tactical strength and conditioning.
Which is the majority of members with the NSCA. I mean, if we think about it,
Yes.
right? I mean, personal trainers make up the high majority of membership for the NSCA. And I got to say, being a member since '93, I was holding on with just fingertips toward the late '90s, early 2000s, after going to national conference every year for several years in a row. If you were to look at my attendance, there was a drop off at one point in time in the early 2000s because I just felt like, hey, this is great information, but it's just not applicable to the world that I'm in. And I know at that time the leadership was very much in the world of academia and the world of NCAA sports and maybe professional sports. And nowhere was anyone really stepping out into the private sector and forget about personal training. I think they were just looking at us as this could be something, but it seems like maybe a flash in the pan. We're going to have to kind of see how this evolves, and because of that, we really weren't part of a lot of the clinics and conferences. The subject matter wasn't really pertaining to us. So, fortunately, fast forward 20 years or 25 years now later, and a lot has changed, which I'm happy. And that's why I love having you on here because we can talk about, as a personal trainer, as a business owner for several years now. I feel like there's a place within the NSCA for professionals like myself. And it's not an empty room or a deaf ear, but there's actually people listening and there's hands being held out to assist. So, and you're one of them, man. I love having conversations with you and seeing how can we raise the bar? I mean, we had Ginny Grimsley, one of our colleagues, on last week, and she was talking about the statistics of personal trainers and how many have dropped off over the course of COVID. So you've got your hands full, I'm imagining. Do you feel that way?
I do, but it's a good thing, right?
Sure.
My one-liner joke is that I complained my way into this position. As you know, it can be hard to make a living as a personal trainer, and I think the thing that's really hard is those of us that really put in the extra effort and the due diligence of learning the scientific foundations and how to do right by our clients. You're set right next to somebody who says, I just like getting a pump on my biceps and hanging out in the gym, therefore I'm a personal trainer as well, right?
Mhm.
That side of things drives me crazy. It's not good for the industry as a whole. It's not good for the people that actually have skin in the game. And it's really not good for the clients at the end of the day either. Um, so I'm sure Jenny's going to be a little bit more polished on the statistics than I am. But what we've found at the NSCA is basically the strong survived through COVID. So it was not a good time, but if you had the wherewithal to make it through COVID, there's a good chance that you at least had your ducks in a row as far as business acumen goes, taking care of your clients, strong retention tactics, that sort of thing. Um, and we found that that really shook out in favor of NSCA trainers because of the additional education that's required to pass our certifications and really just having the complete toolbox to be successful in that space.
Now that's going to be increasing in terms of the qualifying, basically disseminating between the muscle heads that want the pump in the gym and call themselves personal trainers, uh, compared to those that are highly more qualified with their educational experiential background. So what's coming down the pipe for us? What can we expect to see in terms of criteria change?
So I'm going to backtrack just a step and talk about the demographics of what makes up an NSCA personal trainer.
Sure.
Um, So as you mentioned, the majority of our members, or at least our certified constituents, are in the private sector. About 70% of those hold the CSCS, which is our flagship certification. It was initially created for athletic performance, and it does skew very much in that direction. We do have a CPT as well. It's a great certification, but people tend to want to take the CSCS as that educational differentiator, right? You have to have a bachelor's degree to sit for the exam. Therefore, it's a very quick, I've done my due diligence, I know the scientific foundations, that sort of thing. That being said, our CPT is also one of the it's one of the highest earning potentials of any CPT in the field. So nothing to take away from that. Now that I've laid the foundation here, CSCS is going to be going into CASCI accreditation in 2030. So,
And what's CASCI stand for?
oh man, I actually don't know the acronym. I'm sorry, but it's
No
some
problem.
sort of accreditation process, right? It's similar to the boards for physical therapy or licensure for to become an athletic trainer. It's you have to hit all of these different buckets within your curriculum and prove competency for your undergrads for them to be eligible to sit for the CSCS. So that funnel is going to be tightening on who can take it. At this point, if you have a bachelor's degree in any discipline, you can take the CSCS. So they want to make sure that you have an exercise science background specifically tailored to strength and conditioning to be able to sit for the exam. Now, on the other side of things, right, everyone's not trying to be a strength coach in the NFL, but with our reputation at the NSCA, that of being trusted at the top, we want to bring along our other certifications as well to have that differentiating factor that the second you see it, this is going to be a quality individual that I can hit the ground running with this person, right? They may not be able to run a facility by themselves as soon as they get their certification, but I at least know that they'll understand my system when I'm teaching it to them, right?
Yeah.
So that's the goal with the CPT so we had a job task analysis task force back in April that rewrote the detailed content outline, which is what the exam and the textbook are both based off of, to really give it a facelift from the past 10 or 15 years. We're past the days of just doing step class and aerobics and Zumba as personal trainers. And we want to bring that performance mindset that our CSCSs have into the personal training world instead of, you're so broken, here's 87 things you can't do, to let's pick a goal and let's periodize like you do for a sport and, work through performance metrics as opposed to just telling you what you can't do.
Cool. And there will or will not be a degree required for the CPT.
For the CPT at this point, there is no degree required. So it'll still be high school education. In the future, it may move into associates or more. But it's a long, slow process to get to that point. So we'll see what happens within the next few years.
And so you've got universities and colleges that are going to follow a certain curriculum to prepare students to take the CSCS. Is there any consideration for the CPT along that same line? Or will they, just by virtue of following the path laid down with Casca, will they be, would you say they would be equally qualified to take both certification exams?
So at this point, like I said, you can take the CPT fresh out of high school.
Yeah.
It would be a natural progression, right? We're having talks with schools. Campus rec is really where I've been spending a lot of time, is getting your college freshmen that are interested in fitness certified so they can get the hands-on experience. So with the CSCS, there are two sections. There's a practical and scientific, or I'm sorry, there's a scientific foundations and there's a practical applied. We have a 36% first time pass rate on both of those sections. And the one that has failed the most is practical applied. So what we're seeing is, and this we believe is a direct result of COVID. People got stuck behind computers. They got to where they could learn things in a textbook, but then aren't getting out and getting their hands dirty, right? So the natural solution to that would be get certified at the beginning of your college career while you're learning all of these things so that you have 4 years of experience by the time that you sit for the CSCS versus I'm going to sit in class, which is what I did. I sat in class and I learned all of my content and then sat for the exam. So I thought I was the best personal trainer in the world, got into my first session with a 55-year-old woman that I had to do a goblet squat. And she said, my knees hurt. I can't do this. I said, well, that wasn't a part of my plan. So I bombed my first session, even though I had a 4.0 and my kinesiology classes had the CSCS, all that good stuff. You have to get your hands dirty. So while that's not a requirement of the CASKI programs at this point, many junior colleges were actually even working with high school programs as well, that there is funding for the CPT. They'll go through it just like they would like a sports medicine track where you follow around the athletic trainer and tape ankles, right? Like we're working to implement that at the high school level so that strength and conditioning and personal training is a viable career option, so that you can get into it earlier, so that you can get the practical and applied application, so that you can be successful if you choose to go the full strength and conditioning route.
So, being a business owner, post COVID, I would say that the biggest challenge that I face is staffing. I have found, well, we know that over 100,000 personal trainers dropped out of the industry during COVID, and those that remain, many left the big box gyms to try their hand at their own within their own garage or parks or their clients' homes, or maybe even trying to open up their own studio. Uh, and for whatever reason, on top of that, just we have struggled with getting staff trainers and staying for more than 6 months to a year. We used to average 5 years before they would venture off to physical therapy school or chiropractic college, or maybe open their own facility, or get out of the industry entirely. But that was the majority of reasons. These days, like 6 months is a very long time, but that that individual that gets hired here is going to go through several weeks, if not months, of intense training, kind of an internship, and so on. And I bring this up because there's another organization that certifies professionals that has kind of a job placement, if you will, where certified professionals can kind of go into this program, and they will look around for affiliates in different regions, and they would suggest their certified professionals with those private sector or corporations and so on. Does the NSCA have any plans, or do they currently have anything like that? And maybe I'm just not aware of it, but I would love to have some NSCA certified professionals knock on my door and say, "Hey, do you have any openings?" Is that going on?
So I want to take a step back and say that this is a universal issue. This is not just in Santa Cruz, California. That's really a big part of my job, is speaking with gym leadership, and that's happening across the board, Rocky. They
So
can't
I'm
get
not
people to,
unique.
not
This is
unique. You're a great guy,
oh,
but you're not
thank
unique
you.
in this setting.
Beautiful.
yeah, getting qualified people in the door to start with, and then getting people to stay has been a nightmare for pretty much everybody in the past 5 years. I will say there are some resources through the NSCA. Our women's committee is working. They have a mentorship program where some of our vets with the NSCA are taking them through. Right now, it's unstructured. I'd like to see it be a bit more structured, but they're taking them through kind of the ins and outs of what you need to be successful. And then at this point, it's still relatively unstructured as far as job placement goes. But a big initiative for 2025 for the private sector and personal training world is going to be to scale that for the private sector. So big things coming in 2025. We're going to kind of piggyback off of their model and then work on the job placement side of things. So I'm going to be coming after you and putting you to work pretty soon.
Fantastic. I look forward to it. So, in terms of the NSCA pivoting now, as I see it over the last few years, especially post COVID, to involve more personal trainers. I mean, the personal training conference in October, albeit it's virtual, it's still a huge success, and you are a big part of it, being one of the hosts and coordinators. And so, kudos to that. I really enjoy it, and not only as a presenter but attendee, and just being a part of it. um, is there going to be opportunity, and I think I know the answer, but I got to ask you anyway, is there going to be an opportunity for in-person uh, experiences on a national level for personal trainers? Because I do, well, answer that question first, because then I've got other ones.
Well, as you know, strength and conditioning has evolved much past the collegiate football strength coach, right? And I think that's why the NSCA is warming up to personal trainers is kind of what we talked about earlier. Personal training has been looked at as an inferior career path. That's just not the case anymore. If you're looking to be a high earner, there is a much larger percentage of six-figure earners in the private sector than there are in collegiate strength and conditioning. Pros may be the only exception there, right? So it's a viable career path. The reason that the personal trainers conference has been virtual for so long is it's very much a dollars per hour profession, right? If I'm not training, I'm not getting paid unless you can get
Sure.
some systems into place. Online training is changing that. But for the most part, if I miss 4 days of work, that's $1,000 out of my pocket, right? So that was feedback that we've gotten from our members. But there's a big push, especially for those who are really passionate about the NSCA to get the community building side of things, right? We know that's where the profession grows, is when you get the veterans together that are talking about the struggles, and it's not just coming from one centralized location, right? So this year we're actually piloting a much heavier personal training track at National. So that's going to be mid-July. I don't have the dates right off the top of my head. It's usually like 10th through 14th, somewhere in there. But there's going to be a heavy representation of general population and business acumen, that sort of thing. I believe we have about 16 speakers on the docket for that at this point. So that's by far the most we've ever had, especially in my time at the NSCA, but I'm pretty certain that goes for any national conference.
Yeah, I think that the other thing that we really need to discuss too is the importance of in-person experiences, and the virtual aspect. Again, it's great. You can watch the online version of the personal trainers conference in October. You can also watch the recorded versions. It doesn't have to be live, so it won't interfere with your daily schedule, your professional schedule. You can get your CEUs and in the privacy and comfort of your own schedule and home. But the state clinics, the regional conferences, the national conferences, coaches clinics, and so on are 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 so beneficial to the fitness professional, I cannot express it enough because it is where we do our networking. It's where we gather ideas, we share ideas, and we just learn from one another outside the halls of the presenters. And that's why for decades now, I love going to in-person events. And what's really comforting now, Blake, is that there were numbers obviously dropped off and they're starting to resuscitate and climb back to where they were pre-COVID. But a lot of the attendees are first time attendees, and they're realizing that, oh, I've been doing all online training, online education. I'm kind of sick of the online platform. Maybe I'll go and experience this in person event. And the feedback that I've received from a lot of people I talked to at the last conference asking them, so this is your first time, what do you think? They're ecstatic. They're like, I had no idea. So, just to put a plug in to the listening audience, if you haven't gone to an in-person conference, even if it's a local clinic, a state clinic, or regional, then and maybe it's not even NSCA, but another organization that does in-person learning, wholeheartedly, it is the best investment on your career, and the return may not be immediate, but there is a huge return even in the long term. It pays off because, well, you get to meet guys like yourself, and then your connections become my connections. If I need something, maybe I reach out to you and vice versa. And the next thing you know, you're tackling problems that you had no solution to, and now you do. So, I mean, just putting it out there, you love the in-person events, I'm sure, just like anybody else.
Yeah, I mean, we're a people profession, you know? We're not sets and reps. We're how do you make an impact on people's lives? And if you don't get practice talking to people, you're missing you're missing out on the most valuable part of what we do. Um, I mean, I'll plug the NSCA all day. I've been a CSCS for the past 12 years, been working for them for 3 years. I'd be saying the same thing whether or not I have the position I have, but easily the most valuable connections I've ever made professionally. And this trickles over into personal life too, right? I consider you a friend, and I would have never met you if I hadn't gone to one of those conferences.
Exactly.
So it goes back to what we talked about earlier. You're just getting around like-minded, passionate people that, oh, by the way, they happen to be really smart and really good at what they do. So it's invigorating on so many levels. You know, of course you're gonna learn and you're gonna get the professional development. You're gonna get better at the sets and reps, but you're also developing relationships that will last a lifetime. Back to my NSCA job, I met my counterpart on the coaching side of things, Eric McMahon, at an Eric Cressy shoulder conference while I was in Dallas. Um, he was standing in the back with his arms crossed, kind of surveying the room with a Texas Rangers shirt on. So I said, that's the guy I'm going to go talk to. And we just talked shop for like an hour, hour and a half. Looking back, I probably annoyed him quite a bit, but he was really patient with me. And he actually offered me an internship with the Rangers right then and there. And I said, you know what? If I hadn't just moved across the state and have $18 to my name, then I'd probably go work for free again, but just can't do it right now. Um, didn't speak a word to him for 3 years. And then it just so happened that we both moved to Colorado Springs around the same time. So I shot him a text and said, hey, quit following me, haha. And nothing happened for 6 months. And then he just texted me out of the blue. So to your point of you don't have to get the job offer right then and there. You never know what's going to hit or how you're going to be able to collaborate with people. Just, I hate using this word because people do it all the time, but be genuine and truly care about what you're doing and just develop relationships and things are going to shake out how they need to. It doesn't have to be, hi, I'm Blake, give me a job. Just be yourself and make friends and let people know what you're about and it'll happen.
Right on. What do you find as your biggest challenge in trying to attain this goal within the organization, or for that matter, outside of it. But what's your biggest challenge when it comes to your career path?
My career path specifically, or my
Well,
objectives
what you're
at the
trying to
NSCA?
accomplish, what you're trying to accomplish within the NSCA, the projects that you're working on.
The thing that's really hard for me, I think, is I think it's the low barrier to entry, honestly, because it makes it to where, especially at the big box gym level, we'll start there. If you get hired on, zero experience, fresh out of high school, just took a weekend certification, I can pay you 15 or 20 or $20 per session, which, as we know, being in the industry for a while, it's good to get up to 20, 30 sessions a week. At this point, you can't live off of that. And in Colorado, the minimum wage is just under $13 an hour. So I could go get a job at Starbucks and make more money on a 40-hour a week job. So the way I see things is if we can invest a little bit more on the front end, have a qualified individual that's really looking at this as a career path instead of a side hustle or just something that's kind of fun, equip them with the tools that they need to be successful, they're going to stick around for a long time and they'll be able to contribute to whatever business it is that they're a part of. What tends to happen is you get a little bit more of the turn and burn, high volume, low value type of people, or maybe they just don't have the requisite skill set to survive. The first personal training job I ever had, it was, oh, you're certified, here's a t-shirt, go get your clients. So it's really hard to make a living that way. So I'm just really passionate about making this a viable career option for as many people as possible. The thing that's hard for me is talking with big corporations and trying to get them to see the value of investing on the front end instead of just looking at a spreadsheet and saying the numbers aren't going to shake out that way. We're making some progress, but it tends to be with smaller operations like yourself that really invest in the trainer, take them through an internship, really invest and make sure that the quality is high. It's the delayed gratification versus the instant gratification. So I would say that would be challenge one. Challenge two is almost that we're a victim of our own success, right? Everybody knows that the CSCS is the gold standard in sport performance. It's a matter of convincing people, I guess showing people that it may not have all of the tools that you need to be successful, especially if you just want to train general population, right? We're not gonna be taking grandma through the 40-yard dash or the 5-10-5. You probably need to be able to teach her about adherence and how to build habits that are gonna make her lifestyle a little bit more healthy and long-term changes in that regard. So I think that's a big miss is that people think there's not as much value in our CPT certification as there really is, especially for being well-rounded and being out on your own in the private sector.
Well said. Well said. Yeah. I get a sense also that it things don't move glacially, but maybe up to the speed of molasses, perhaps. And I think that might be another challenge because you're a snowboarder, you're on the go, you're a surfer, you want to take action, jump and go. And so, how do you? I guess this would be my last question: is how do you deal with that? How do you work with a tempo that is not quite the degree that you would prefer it to be?
Quite honestly, it's a struggle. Especially coming from the sport performance world. If you're in a room with 50 athletes that are at one station, and you have to get them ready for their next combo while also making sure that they're moving the barbell at the speed they need to. We're very used to tackling 17 things at one time and being preemptive on what needs to be fixed. So that may be the biggest struggle of the past 3 years that I've had with this job, is that things just move a little bit more slowly. But really, it's people like yourself and the leadership in the professional development group with the NSCA that really help to kind of stratify what we can work on, right? There's a nice to have, and there's kind of a more realistic bucket of things that we can work on. And I think our regular meetings with the PDG and really hearing from the different disciplines of personal training and what's working, where we can move the needle, that's what's been most encouraging to me, because it's a lot of hurry up and wait in the corporate world, which I was not ready for. And I'm still kind of trying to figure it out myself, because I'm so passionate about this field. There's so many things that, we could put up a whiteboard right now and probably write down 50 things that are wrong with the industry that we want fixed. But unfortunately, I've found that's just not how it works. So small victories and trying to continue momentum where we can. That's the best answer I have for now.
No worries. Well, I misspoke when I said that would be my last question, because I do probably have at least one more. And in regards to what we're talking about here, the CSCS, as you mentioned, is the gold standard, and most performance coaches and strength coaches that I have had on the show hold CSCS credentials, amongst other things. And these are the men and women that are the performance coaches in all major league sports, whether it's the NFL, the NHL, or otherwise. Now, most of their top level athletes during the offseason have their own trainers. And so when they go home or wherever they go to in the offseason, even preseason, postseason, depending on how they did, they will go and work with these trainers. But I think for myself, I've had athletes in the same regard, some in the NHL and NBA, that during the offseason they come to Santa Cruz and they train with me. Now, how did they get here? Well, it wasn't because of any of the performance coaches on the team or anybody on those teams. It was because they came to Santa Cruz and my name came up regionally, and they sought me out because of that. So it would be really cool if there was some kind of rapport with the NSCA and all of the major league sports organizations, eh, not only for the CSCS, but for when their athletes go off season or when their rookies need development before they show up for their first day, that we have a a network of NSCA CPTs who may also have the CSCS, where there is a directory that's regional. So, oh, you're heading back to Ottumwa, Iowa, or Des Moines, or Lansing, Michigan. Here are the professionals that are certified within the NSCA that you may want to look at. Just throwing it out there, brother. I don't even know if it's a question, but do we have something like that in store?
We are currently working on that on our back end system. Now, once again, timeline may not be what we want it to be, but
That's all right.
I'm hopeful that this will happen within the next 1 to 3 years.
Yeah.
Um, we have, what is it? I'm gonna butcher this. Is it the Employers Council? There's I'll try to get it to you. Maybe you can stick it in the show
The
notes.
entrepreneurs, the entrepreneur special interest group?
No,
No.
this is a nationally accredited professional directory.
Oh,
The
yes.
name is slipping me.
USA. Not Fit USA. I know what you're talking about. Yeah. We're in it.
Yes, so you can go search for CSCSs and CPTs in your area there. I'm not sure how up to date it is. And then comes the question of, are all CSCSs created equal? Are all CPTs created equal? Right?
Right.
which hopefully accreditation will address that. But
Well, I don't want to show my age here, but there used to be a CD-ROM which had an NSCA directory of everyone that was certified. I'm not
oh
going to
wow,
say the era that was, but yeah, and I had it. I actually had the CD-ROM that had a directory of everyone. So I don't know how much work it would be to put out something online that showed everyone everywhere and what they hold, but it may not be a bad page to have on the NSCA's website.
I do think
Ah,
that's coming down the pipeline. I think
I'm
it's on its way.
glad to hear that. Blake, this has been just so fun to catch up with you. And if you do find yourself in Santa Cruz the next couple of months, you will be stopping off so we can grab some waves or at least a cup of something together. I can't thank you enough for coming on. And I look forward to, if not in a couple of months, then seeing you in Kansas City at the national conference where we'll be hanging out there and sharing more ideas. So thanks for your time.
It's been an honor. Appreciate it.
Well, that's a wrap for this episode of the Zealous Podcast. I want to thank Blake for coming on and sharing a little bit about what he's been doing at NSCA headquarters in Colorado Springs. Remember, if you need continuing education, go to my website, rockysnyder.com. We've got programs for chiropractors, athletic trainers, personal trainers, physical therapists, strength coaches even. Just go to my website. We've got courses online as well as in person. But don't forget about Satanta College. If you want a Master's of Science in a related field, you can get 10% off tuition by entering the code RS10. Remember to follow us on Instagram and get a copy of my book, Return to Center. In case you got insomnia, sure to help.